What is going on, guys? We are back for another episode of Makai's Money Making Plays. This week we got UFC Rio, Charles Oliveira taking on Mateusz Gamrot. You already know how the video goes. We're going to start it off with the lock of the week, my most confident picks, favorite underdogs, and then we're going to wrap it up with my favorite section, your favorite section, Makai's Money Making Plays, the parlays. So make sure you guys like, comment, and subscribe to the channel, and let's get the video underway. Going back to last week's lock of the week, you know we ended up going with Corey Sandhagen, point spread, plus 5.5. But obviously that did not come through with us, with Merab damn near knocking him out in the second round.
Really finding the range on the feet. Got him hurt. Sandhagen nearly down. Wallace Willie called for the knockout, said he was going to knock Sandhagen out. Merab's going to knock him out like you said.
And just absolutely dominating for the next 4 rounds after that. I thought Corey Sandhagen would put up a better fight than what he did. You know, the first round definitely had me sold. I said, oh, we're definitely, coming out of this one alive, because he looked like he was going to win, not necessarily win the fight, but he definitely put on a better performance than, the other contenders that we've seen. It looked, kind of similar to the Umar fight, Umar versus Merab fight, but Corey, second round, almost getting knocked out by Merab is kind of embarrassing. Merab is not the biggest puncher. He's known for his gas tank. He usually just drains guys. But for him to, get clipped by Merab, his last knockout was, against Marlon Moraes a couple years ago. And that was just him overcoming a knockout as well. It was a little embarrassing. Glad that he didn't get knocked out, because he definitely would have had that, stain on his jacket for the rest of his career. But definitely not a good look. He ended up getting... he lost a point. He got 10-8'd in that round, actually. So that, wiped the floor with the spread off of that alone, and then getting dominated for the rest of the fight definitely didn't help whatsoever. So, another L. But again, I felt like the read was there if Corey could have done a little bit more, but it is what it is. We got a new fight card. We got a new week. We got new opportunities, and I definitely love what I'm seeing on this card. Definitely have somebody in mind that I am going to be locking in. Don't want to waste any more time, so let's get into UFC Rio's lock of the week. Charles "Do Bronx" Oliveira, lock of the week, minus 104, minus 105. I'm seeing it floating around that number up to minus 110. Wherever you could get it, whatever number you could get it at, between those numbers, lock it in. Charles Oliveira is winning this fight. Yes, I know Gamrot is a pressure wrestler. Yes, I know Charles Oliveira has faced a couple pressure wrestlers or some really good grapplers in the past. Yes, he has a loss to Islam Makhachev. Yes, he has a loss to Arman Tsarukyan. Islam and Gamrot are completely two different fighters. One, Islam is better on the feet than Gamrot, and two, he's much better at controlling you when he gets you down. He also, submitted Charles Oliveira, the most prolific submission artist in the UFC, which was absolutely, crazy to see that happen. But Gamrot is a guy who doesn't go for submission attempts. He barely finishes fights. If you look through his record, I believe he has one knockout in the UFC and maybe 2 or 3 submissions. But again, most of his wins are decisions, with him accumulating, control time, getting you down, taking you, or letting you get up, getting you back down. A lot of his wins don't really come from finishing sequences. Let's look at the Arman Tsarukyan fight. Charles Oliveira had Arman in lots of trouble within that fight. Arman, I believe, is a better control grappler than Mateusz Gamrot. And like I said, Oliveira had him in a submission, 2 or 3 submission attempts in every single round. So if you're giving me a guy with less control ability in the wrestling against Charles Oliveira, I think he's live to finish the fight. We don't need to chase a finish for Charles. I'm taking a money line. The price is, good enough as it is. But again, I feel as though Charles is better on the feet. I think he can, even if he gets taken down, which he is very accepting of doing, he's dangerous off of his back, not only with the submissions, but even with slicing elbows from bottom. We saw that against, We saw that against Arman, and we also saw it against Ilya. He also has really good rangy weapons like the teep, the very long uppercut that he throws. He caught Ilya with that as well before, you know, he absolutely got knocked out. But again, Charles Oliveira, better on the feet, better on the mat. He'll be accepting of the wrestling, which is something that he wasn't preparing to do. But now that he is, you know, he was supposed to fight Rafael Fiziev, where, like I told you in a predictions video, I was completely terrified for his chin going up against Fiziev, because Fiziev is a super fast kickboxer, throws a lot of power, and can definitely crack. But now that he's not going up against that style, I think he can control this fight wherever it goes. Let's say Gamrot takes him down in the first round. Let's say Oliveira accepts it, throws a couple submission attempts in there, but Gamrot ultimately wins the first round. Second round comes out, Gamrot shoots for another takedown, and Oliveira defends it. Now Gamrot is definitely in trouble. If you go back to the Dan Hooker fight, yes, I know Dan Hooker is primarily a striker, but even he was able to work back to his feet and rock Gamrot in that first round, was able to defend the takedowns, and ultimately won a split decision. Charles Oliveira is a better finisher than Dan Hooker. If Dan Hooker is hurting Gamrot the way that he did, Charles Oliveira, who has more power than Dan Hooker, who is a better finisher than Dan Hooker, I feel as though he can definitely finish Gamrot on the feet, submission, wherever the fight goes. The only caution I had with taking Charles Oliveira for the lock of the week was going to be his chin, seeing that, you know, he fought 3 months ago, gotten absolutely starched by Ilya Topuria. But Mateusz Gamrot has not shown power in his striking game. He's very, you know, it's like a flurry attack. You look at how he, you know, was doing some ground and pound against Dan Hooker. It really was not accurate punches, nothing with, you know, meat behind it, really. I don't think Mateusz Gamrot has the power to even clip a Charles Oliveira. Maybe he can get him, you know, in a sequence where he takes him down and throws a couple of, you know, ground strikes. But again, we've seen Charles Oliveira weather storms, recover, and come out in the second round and absolutely starch people. So I'm not worried about Charles Oliveira's chin. I'm not worried about him getting taken down, and I'm not worried about Gamrot on the feet. I feel as though the better fighter, the better finisher, and the better the better fighter to pick between these two is definitely Charles Oliveira. And I'm going with Illuminato do Bronx, Charles Oliveira, to bring us back on the winning side for lock of the week. Give me Charles Oliveira this week. Now, moving on to the most confident picks. I got a couple for you. I'll bring up three right now. I got Walter Walker, Julia Pilastri, and Joel Alvarez. Let's start with Walter Walker. Like I told you in the prediction video, I do believe he's going to drop down and find Muhammad Usman's heel and lock up another heel hook. I don't see, you know, Muhammad Usman as being a guy who could keep the fight on the feet for a while. I know, you know, you go back and look at the Hamde Abdullah fight, but again, he's not a, you know, submission artist like Walter Walker is. And Walter, who's also pretty large too, you know, he's 6'5". He also slimmed down a lot, got his body back into better shape. And, you know, for him to finish Kennedy and Nzechukwu the way that he did, who I thought was a better, you know, or who is definitely a better fighter than Muhammad Usman, definitely a better striker. I don't see how there isn't a world where Walter Walker gets it done by submission in this one again. I know he's talking about getting a knockout, but I feel as though that's just to, you know, set up Muhammad Usman, keep his hands up, preparing that he's going to be, you know, striking with this guy. But Walter Walker is going to close the distance, get him up against the cage, and find that heel hook probably within the first 3 minutes of the fight. So Walter Walker, first round heel hook, like I told you in the prediction video. Next, we're going Julia Pilastri. Minus 450 isn't a price that I really want to pay for Julia Pilastri, but I do feel as though she should be able to beat Karolina Kowalkiewicz, who does not have power in her hands whatsoever. I feel as though she'll be able to walk through anything that she gets thrown back at her. You look at the Pilastri versus Lupi Godinez fight. I feel as though Godinez definitely has more power than Karolina, but even Julia was, you know, wasn't really deterred by much other than the wrestling, which is something that Karolina doesn't really have in this fight. Julia should be able to walk through anything. Probably, you know, she could be live for like a ground and pound finish. I could see her dropping her and then jumping on top of her and probably finishing the fight. But again, minus 450 isn't a price I want to pay. But I understand why the line what it is. And again, you know, Karolina coming off of the 2 fights that she's had against Denise Gomes and Yasmin Lucindo, powerful and sharp striking with speed, something that Julia Pilastri possesses, you know, both elements of that as well. I think Pilastres should win pretty easily. So give me Pilastres here. And then we're moving on to Joel Alvarez. Now, I really like Joel Alvarez as a fighter. He's one of my, I made a list a while ago of my top 15 favorite fighters in the UFC. I think he was number 15 or number like 14, somewhere around there. But I definitely like Joel Alvarez. It's been a while since he's fought. I believe he was dealing with an injury prior to moving up. I think he got hurt preparing for that Benoit Saint-Denis fight, and then he said, you know what, I'm just going to move up to 170, killing myself trying to make 155. And that, I do believe he's going to look much sharper, much stronger. I do believe the speed shouldn't be an issue either. Luque is a guy who is willing to fight, and I don't like Alvarez sitting so high, of a favorite when this is his welterweight debut. But I mean, how could you not pick Alvarez to knock out Vicente Luque here? I do feel as though he is going to knock him out. I think it would behoove him to knock him out early in his fight, because the longer that the fight goes on, Luque is a guy who, think of it like a snowball going downhill. If he builds a little bit of confidence, that ball is just going to get bigger and bigger and bigger. And, Luque is a guy who we have seen, be able to get a couple of guys out of there. His jiu-jitsu is pretty good. Does have some pretty good striking as well. But if you open up, Vicente Luque's record and you really look through it, he's lost he's lost, I believe, like 4 out of his last 6. He's been getting finished. Also, Kevin Holland subbed him up. He's been knocked out not too long ago. He's got a couple wins here and there, but again, it's against an undersized RDA. And Joel Alvarez, a 6'3" welterweight, he has a freakish frame. I think he's definitely going to be able to generate a lot more power up at welterweight. I think he's definitely going to be able to, work the clinch that he likes to do. He's got some nasty knees, nasty elbows. I think Joel Alvarez is definitely live for a finish, and I think he gets it done within the first 7 minutes of the fight. So Joel Alvarez, even though the price is ugly, I do lean towards him getting a knockout. I do have one more I want to bring up, and that's going to be Montel Jackson. Now, I was a little iffy on putting him as a most confident pick because I do have a lot of respect for Deiveson Figueiredo. But again, Figueiredo coming off of that injury doesn't really sit well with me. I feel as though his movement is going to be really compromised. He's also a guy that likes to sit and wait and react to what you're going to do. I don't see him being able to, he likes to do that pull counter, but he's not going to be able to do it against Montel Jackson, who's way longer, who's way taller. And, the speed that Montel Jackson possesses is something that I don't feel as though Deiveson Figueiredo has seen at bantamweight. And he's also not, knocking guys out at bantamweight like we've seen him do at flyweight. Excuse me, I was about to say featherweight. But again, he's got a couple of wins, but I feel as though Montel Jackson is just too prime, too long, too rangy, and he can follow, Figueiredo wherever the fight goes. I do think Montel Jackson wins this fight. I don't know if it's going to be by finish or by decision, but I do think he wins the fight. Like I said, I just have a lot of respect for Figgy, and I didn't want to put Montel Jackson up here and say, yeah, he's going to knock him out because his knee is compromised and this, that, and the third. But I do feel as though he wins ultimately at the end of the day. So he is the most confident pick for me. Let's move on. Favorite underdogs. I only have 2, honestly, throughout this card, and I'm going to pull them up for you here. Mario Pinto and Irene Alexieva. I'm going to start with Mario Pinto. The reason why I like Pinto in this spot is because, yes, he's facing another striker, and Joan Namajunas does have a lot more experience than him, but it's only in, kickboxing. Both of these guys have the same amount of fights. Deniz is 9-1. Pinto is 10-0. Deniz, we have seen have trouble with grappling. I feel as though Pinto does have a loss in his amateur record where he was taken down and ground and pound finished. But Pinto is a guy who will, incorporate grappling into his fight if it needs to happen. I know we haven't seen that in the UFC or even on the Contender Series, but he has done it in a couple of his fights. If you go back and look, does have a couple ground and pound victories. I do feel as though Pinto would be the guy to initiate the grappling in this fight. And that is something that we've seen Deniz look like a fish out of water in. So if you're going to give me, a striking match between two guys, but one of them has the wrestling in his back pocket, not necessarily saying that he's a, tremendous wrestler, but even the thought of that can definitely disturb things for Jonathan Deniz. I feel as though he is live to win this fight, and I do like the price on him. I will say, for Pinto, if you look at the picture, man, he looks like, he's asleep. He does lull a lot of guys to sleep. He did that to Austin Lane and then caught him with a big shot. I know a lot of people are giving him a little bit of flack for, getting dropped by Austin Lane. But to me, I'm watching the fight back. It didn't really look like, he was hurt or anything. He was really just rolling with a couple of shots, got stuck in a position, and then, Lane just put it on him right there. And he fell back on his butt. It wasn't like he got, all dazed and rocked or anything like that. He fell on his butt, got right back up, and then in the very next round, he put Austin Lane right out. So you go back and look at Austin Lane tackling Jonathan Deniz. Very little, technical wrestling within that. Just really just speared him like Edge and took him down and had him at full mount, throwing some shots. But again, Austin Lane isn't really a good measurement to gauge, when guys are fighting against each other. But you incorporate that, him getting taken down by Austin Lane with Marcin Tybura taking him down and absolutely wrecking him and finishing him in that first round that they had. There's a pathway for Pinto to incorporate some grappling and take him down and maybe finish, maybe not. But I will lean for this fight to go to a decision. I do think if they both respect each other in the striking, it can be a very slow paced fight where both of them are, throwing a lot of leg kicks, throwing a lot of jabs, seeing what each other is given, and then maybe we go to the scorecards. But I do like Mario Pinto as an underdog plus 100. Now, like I told you in the breakdown, Irina Alekseeva, I feel as though she has the better striking in this matchup. She does have some jiu-jitsu on her own, and she also has, the judo background. That's why her nickname is the Russian Ronda. I don't think she's just going to get taken down and ragdolled by Beatriz. I don't like the number on Beatriz. That's really, I'm really picking Irina because if you go back and look at some of Beatriz's fights, she's getting rocked by jabs. She's quitting and, from illegal up kicks. Yes, it was an illegal strike, but she doesn't have that dog in her that Irina has. And she's someone that will just throw caution to the wind. Yeah, she might miss big, but when she connects, it can definitely do some damage. She's not, a knockout striker, but she definitely throws big strikes. And if you're fading to a jab or even, an illegal shot that wasn't necessarily the hardest, what are you going to do when Irina Alekseeva catches you with, the crazy looping overhand right, and you don't really like being hit too much? I can't pick a person who is just going to, she's not a guard puller from what I've seen, but someone who wants to take you down, do jiu-jitsu, and completely avoid striking when this is mixed martial arts. I can't pick someone who's, curling up to punches, curling up to a couple of kicks. I feel as though Alekseeva is going to be more active on the feet. I feel as though she will be able to defend a couple of takedowns. Even if she gets taken down, I think she could stay safe. I don't think she's going to get absolutely submitted, within the very first minute of the fight or anything like that. But plus 385 for Alekseeva, who's super chaotic, kind of like I'm not even going to say it. I won't go too that far, but the chaos that she brings can definitely give Beatriz a lot of trouble. And that's why I like her as an underdog. And I'm also picking her on the card. I could either, I'll either have a lot of egg on my face or I'm going to look as intelligent as I did when I picked Kyle Dawkins to knock out Michelle Pieta. So I'll let you guys decide that. Let me know in the comments if you're, you're tailing the pick or not. But again, I'm not a fan of Beatriz Mosqueda. I don't think she's good. I don't think she's UFC level. She's not developing as much as I would like for her to, from what I've seen as well. So give me Alekseeva, man. I got to go with the chaos factor. Now, let's move on to my favorite section, your favorite section, Makai's Money Making Parlays, where we are trying to bring home some money for UFC Rio. Got a couple plays for you here. Let's get it started. Montel Jackson, Joel Alvarez, Julia Pilastri, three of the most confident picks. Really do think they're going to get it done. Minus 109. Then we move on. We got Charles Oliveira, lock of the week, tying it up with the over 1.5. Joe Diniz versus Mario Pinto, plus 199. Like I said, I do favor the striking match to go a little longer. Like I said, I think they're going to give each other a lot of respect. Also, with Pinto being a guy that likes to, wait and lull guys to sleep for a little bit. He's very reactive in that first round. Then we're going Montel, Joel, and Charles Oliveira, plus 210. Walter Walker, Petrino, and Oliveira, plus 239. We're in Rio, so why not pick the 3 Brazilian guys to get it done? Also have another play, as you guys can see at the bottom, but we'll get to that when we get to that. Then we're going Joel KO with Ricardo Ramos. I thought about picking Ramos by KO, but he's a guy who doesn't have a lot of finishes in the UFC. I like his striking, but he doesn't have a lot of finishes in the UFC as well. So I'll just take a money line. If you want to replace, the money line with the KO and go Joel KO, Ricardo Ramos KO, I could get you the price on that right here. Actually, give me 2 seconds. That's why you don't screenshot. Let's go Joel KO. Joel KO is plus 155. And then let's go to Ricardo Ramos. Ricardo Ramos by KO is plus 600. So you put those two together, you're looking at plus 1685. If you want to go ahead and do it, hey, go right ahead. But again, like I said, he's not a guy who has a lot of finishes in the UFC. That's why I'm not putting that as an official play, but maybe it's something that I look at live. You never know. Then we are going to Charles, the under 1.5 in the Joel versus Luque. Like I said, I do feel as though it would behoove him to get it done early. And then Walter Walker plus 335. Montel, Joel KO, Pinto versus Diniz over 1.5 plus 425. And then the big play that I was telling you all about, Walter Walker, Charles Oliveira, and Vitor Petrino by sub plus 4,900. Now, I already told you to break down on Walter Walker. I gave you my method for Charles Oliveira. I feel as though he can win this fight no matter where it goes. And we all know he's a submission specialist. If Gamrot is going to be shooting the single leg, which is something that I see him do a lot, leave his leg on the outside, Charles Oliveira is going to rip that neck apart and submit him. So that's why we got that there. And then Vitor Petrino, I know a lot of people are on the knockout, but he also has some very good grappling. And against Thomas Peterson, who I do feel as though he's trying to avoid the power from Petrino, looking to take him down, I feel as though Petrino could definitely lock up a neck as well. So big play. I definitely recommend, play all 3 of them straight and, do a round robin, whatever you want to do. But I like that play. I'm trying to bang some big bread like I did a couple cards ago with Walter Walker and Jake Matthews by sub. That was upwards of, I believe it was 5,500 plus 5,500. So if we could repeat it again, why not? I definitely love that play, and I do feel as though it's live to come through. But that is what I got for this week's UFC Rio Makai's money making plays, the lock of the week. Let me know in the comments what you guys think. If you don't like the lock of the week, let me know in the comments who you guys are picking as your lock. I definitely want to hear what you guys got to say. If you don't like the most confident picks, the underdogs, if you got an underdog that you think I'm slipping on, let me know. I'd love to hear what you guys are always thinking. So thanks for tuning in. I will catch you weigh-in recap, and make sure you guys like, comment, and subscribe to the channel. Turn the post notifications on. Support the channel in the bio if you guys want. And I'll see you on the next vid. Peace out.
Thank you.